Welcome to the Compact Disasters podcast from compactdisasters.com, the show where we explore natural and human-made disasters from around the world. This is episode 64, the Icelandic volcano that grounded Europe. In the spring of 2010, a remote volcano in Iceland achieved something no military power, political crisis, or terrorist threat had ever managed. It brought European air travel to a near-complete standstill. For nearly a week, skies across much of the continent were empty. Airports fell silent, millions of passengers were stranded, and global supply chains buckled. The cause was Eyjafjallajökull, a volcano buried beneath an ice cap whose eruption sent a vast plume of ash into one of the busiest air corridors on Earth. What followed was not just a natural disaster, but a complex collision of geology, modern technology, risk management, and global interconnectedness. This was not a story of lava flows consuming towns or dramatic explosions flattening cities. Instead, it was a subtler but equally powerful reminder that modern society rests on fragile systems. When nature interferes with those systems in unexpected ways, the consequences can ripple far beyond the eruption itself. Iceland is one of the most volcanically active places on the planet. It sits astride the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates meet, and where they are slowly pulling apart. Molten rock rises from deep within the earth to fill the gap, creating a landscape shaped by eruptions, lava fields, geothermal vents, and glaciers. More than 100 volcanoes are considered active in Iceland, and eruptions are a regular feature of its geological history. Most occur far from population centres and cause limited disruption. Icelanders are used to living with volcanoes and have developed strong monitoring systems and emergency planning. What made Eyjafjallajökull different was not its size or violence, but its timing, location, and interaction with ice and wind. Eyjafjallajökull itself is not among Iceland's largest volcanoes. It rises to just under 1,700 meters and is capped by a glacier roughly 80 square kilometers in area. The presence of this ice would prove crucial in shaping the eruption that followed. In late 2009 and early 2010, Icelandic scientists detected increased seismic activity beneath Eyjafjallajökull. Small earthquakes rattled the area, a common sign that magma was moving underground. Monitoring stations recorded ground deformation as pressure built below the volcano. These signals were taken seriously, but they did not initially suggest a major crisis. However, that view began to change on the 20th of March 2010, when Eyjafjallajökull erupted for the first time in nearly 2 centuries. Lava broke through a fissure on the volcano's flank, away from the main ice cap. This phase of the eruption was relatively gentle. Tourists gathered to watch glowing lava fountains against the night sky. The eruption was dramatic but manageable, and flights continued largely unaffected. However, this was only the beginning. On the 14th of April 2010, the eruption shifted to the volcano's central crater, directly beneath the ice cap. This change transformed the nature of the event. When hot magma came into contact with thick glacial ice, it caused explosive fragmentation. The ice melted rapidly, triggering floods known as jökulhlaups that rushed down nearby valleys. Roads and bridges were damaged, and local evacuations were carried out efficiently. More importantly for the wider world, the interaction between magma and ice produced enormous quantities of fine volcanic ash. Unlike heavier ash that falls quickly to the ground, this material was exceptionally small and light. It was blasted high into the atmosphere, reaching cruising altitudes used by commercial aircraft. Once airborne, the ash encountered strong winds that carried it eastward across the North Atlantic and into European airspace. Volcanic ash is not soft like fireplace ash. It consists of tiny shards of rock and glass created when magma is shattered by explosive eruptions. These particles are highly abrasive and can cause severe damage to aircraft. When ash is ingested into jet engines, it can melt inside the combustion chamber and then re-solidify on turbine blades, disrupting airflow and causing engines to fail. Ash can also scratch cockpit windows, clog sensors, contaminate air systems, and damage critical components. In the worst case, it can lead to the complete loss of engine power. Several near disasters in previous decades had demonstrated these risks. In 1982, a British Airways flight flew through an ash cloud over Indonesia and lost power in all 4 engines before narrowly recovering. Similar incidents reinforced the aviation industry's caution. The standard approach was simple: avoid ash entirely. As the ash cloud from Eyjafjallajökull spread across Europe, aviation authorities faced a difficult choice. At the time, there were no agreed safe thresholds for ash concentration. Without precise data, regulators adopted a precautionary approach. Large areas of airspace were closed to all civilian flights. Beginning on the 15th of April 2010, airports across the United Kingdom, Ireland, Scandinavia, and much of mainland Europe shut down. Over the following days, closures expanded and contracted as forecasts changed, but the overall impact was unprecedented. At the peak of the disruption, more than 100,000 flights were cancelled. Airports that usually handled tens of thousands of passengers a day became silent. Aircraft sat idle on runways. Crews were stranded far from home. Travellers slept on terminal floors or scrambled for alternative transport. The grounding of flights quickly revealed how dependent modern Europe had become on air travel. Business meetings were cancelled. Perishable goods rotted in warehouses. Factories relying on just-in-time delivery suspended production. Hospitals reported shortages of medical supplies normally flown in from abroad. The disruption extended far beyond Europe. Flights between North America and Asia were rerouted or cancelled. Tourists were stranded across continents. Some attempted epic journeys home by train, bus, ferry, and car, improvising routes that would have been unthinkable days earlier. Airlines lost hundreds of millions of pounds. Governments faced mounting pressure from industry leaders and the public to reopen airspace. Yet the ash cloud was invisible to the naked eye and difficult to track precisely, making decisions fraught with uncertainty. As the crisis dragged on, criticism grew. Airlines argued that airspace closures were overly cautious and based on incomplete science. Some carriers conducted test flights and reported no damage. Others accused regulators of hiding behind safety to avoid liability. At the heart of the problem was a lack of data. While scientists could model ash dispersion, measuring actual concentrations in real time was extremely difficult. Satellites could detect ash clouds, but not always accurately assess density. Ground-based sensors were limited. Eventually, a compromise emerged. New guidelines were introduced that defined acceptable ash concentrations for flight under controlled conditions. Airlines adapted maintenance procedures and flight planning to account for these thresholds. Gradually, airspace reopened. By the 21st of April, most major airports were operational again, though disruptions continued intermittently as Eyjafjallajökull remained active. Eyjafjallajökull continued erupting at lower intensity into May 2010 before finally subsiding. In Iceland, the physical damage was relatively limited. A few farms were abandoned, infrastructure was repaired, and the landscape slowly settled. Compared to many volcanic disasters, the local human cost was low. Globally, however, the eruption left a lasting impression. It exposed vulnerabilities in systems that were assumed to be robust. A medium-sized volcano in a sparsely populated country had managed to paralyze international travel across an entire continent. Estimates of the economic cost varied, but airlines alone were believed to have lost over £1 billion. Tourism sectors suffered heavily, particularly in regions already recovering from the global financial crisis. Insurance claims mounted. Governments debated compensation and responsibility. Yet the impact was not purely negative. Rail networks saw a surge in passengers. Some businesses reconsidered their reliance on rapid air freight. Environmental groups noted the temporary reduction in carbon emissions and questioned the necessity of some short-haul flights. In the years following the eruption, significant changes were made. Aviation authorities invested in better ash detection systems, including improved satellites, airborne sensors, and modelling tools. Clearer guidelines were established to avoid blanket airspace closures in future events. The crisis also encouraged greater collaboration between volcanologists, meteorologists, and aviation experts. Volcanic ash advisory centres refined their methods, and contingency planning became more sophisticated. Perhaps most importantly, the event challenged assumptions about risk. It demonstrated that low-probability, high-impact events must be taken seriously, even when they originate far from centres of power or population. Eyjafjallajökull's name became a minor cultural phenomenon. News presenters across the world stumbled over its pronunciation. Jokes circulated, and the volcano briefly became a symbol of nature's mischievous side. Behind the humour, however, lay a serious truth. The eruption revealed how disconnected modern society often is from the natural processes that underpin daily life. The skies we take for granted exist at the mercy of forces deep within the earth. For Iceland, the eruption reinforced its identity as a land shaped by geology. Tourism eventually surged as visitors arrived to see the landscapes made famous by the event. Scientists continued monitoring nearby volcanoes, particularly Katla, a much larger system thought to be linked to Eyjafjallajökull. The eruption also strengthened Iceland's reputation for effective disaster management. Evacuations were orderly, communication was clear, and scientific expertise played a central role in decision-making. The Icelandic volcano that grounded Europe remains one of the defining natural events of the early 21st century. It did not cause mass casualties or dramatic destruction, yet millions felt its impact. It revealed the fragility of global systems and the difficulty of managing risk in an interconnected world. Unlike disasters that strike suddenly and then pass, this crisis unfolded in slow motion, forcing authorities and individuals alike to confront uncertainty day after day. It showed that modern disruption does not always come in the form of explosions or floods. Sometimes it arrives as an invisible cloud, drifting silently across the sky. Eyjafjallajökull's 2010 eruption was a geological event with global consequences. It grounded planes, stranded passengers, disrupted economies, and reshaped aviation policy. More than that, it offered a rare moment of collective pause when the deep rhythms of the earth temporarily halted the relentless movement of modern life. The volcano has since returned to quiet watchfulness beneath its ice cap. Planes once again crisscross European skies without a second thought, yet the memory remains. Beneath every flight path lies a reminder that nature sets the ultimate terms, and that even the most advanced technologies must adapt when the planet decides otherwise. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Compact Disasters podcast from compactdisasters.com. If you did, why not leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts? And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you would like to support us more directly, please consider buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/disaster coffee to see how. Also, please check out our other Compact podcasts. You will find them all at compacthistories.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.